views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronxtalk. You will be mortified to know that there are unscrupulous so-called deed thieves who are scamming Bronxites out of their homes. These foreclosure scam artists are reaping millions off the backs of struggling New York homeowners, affecting more than 2,700 families in New York State, accounting for more than $8 million in losses to everyday New Yorkers. They're targeting the most vulnerable of us, the elderly, the disabled, people who have lost their jobs, and others who face the potential of foreclosure. So on tonight's show, we'll do a bit of public service with a couple of experts. What do homeowners need to know? How can you identify a scam before you get caught? And most importantly, scam aside, if you're falling behind in your mortgage, how can you get legitimate help and feel secure that you are not being railroaded? Now, if you have questions or comments or would like to ask about your specific situation, we have the experts here to help. Call in at 718-960-7261, or if you'd like, send an email to bronxtalk@bronxnet.org, and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of our program, and we will forward it to the experts to get you an answer as necessary. For the here and now, the director of the Foreclosure Prevention Unit for Bronx Legal Services, it is Justin Haynes. Good evening, Mr. Haynes.
Thank you. Thank
you for joining us. And the executive director of the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, Christy Peel. Good evening, Christy, and welcome to Bronxtalk.
Glad to be here.
Ms. Peel, let's start with you. Just give us a little background. I mean, I laid the foundation of what we're going to talk about, but what is this? Where are we? Why are Bronxites and others losing their homes?
Well, so the Center for New York City Neighborhoods was set up to help homeowners who are at risk of foreclosure. And just to start out, it's a great place for homeowners to go to get help. So you can call 311 and we'll help folks either.
Now, wait. You went right into that.
I know.
You call 311 but not call your offices?
You can call 311 if you don't.
Because we have all that contact info
Great.
you're going to get. Go ahead, I'm
so
sorry.
311 is an easy way to get in touch with us. But I say that to start with because we've been working with homeowners who've been fighting foreclosure for many, many years now. And what we've seen specific to scams is that in the early days of the foreclosure crisis, a lot of the people that were pushing predatory loans, once the foreclosure crisis started, wanted to find other ways to try and peddle their
wares, so to speak.
Their bad deeds, right? And one of the first things that we saw was that they tried to pretend that they were there to help people who were in foreclosure get modifications. So it was an early indicator that there was going to be a lot of scam activity targeted at vulnerable folks.
Is it a reasonable question to ask, well, why this? Or is it, I guess, human nature that if there's an opportunity to do wrong or steal some money, that's going to happen? Or is there a particular reason that this has become an issue and has been a consistent one for almost 10 years?
Well, I mean...
You want to answer that? Go ahead.
Well, when the foreclosure crisis came, banks were really unprepared to deal with a large number of people that were going to be facing foreclosure, and they did a really bad job of setting up their process to do loan modifications. They would lose people's paperwork. Homeowners were just incredibly frustrated, and if someone could help you out of that frustration by saying, hey, give me a couple $1,000s and I'm going to get you a low interest rate, a low payment, these scammers prey on desperation and frustration of homeowners.
And they also try very hard. They invest in trying to look legitimate, right? So they'll use symbols that look like they're government certified. They'll be very slick. They really invest in trying to deceive people. So there's no shame in being taken in by some of these people. They advertise on the radio, on the internet, and I think that they're really taking advantage of people's frustration and inability to see a path forward.
This raises a couple of questions. Number one, who are they? I mean, are these just criminals? Are these just people saying, gee, I always wanted to do something to steal money? Or do they come maybe out of the real estate industry or the financial industry? And then the next thing I do want to ask you about is the notion of being on the radio or television. But let's start with that first question.
They come, we've seen bad actors come in all shapes and sizes, but for the most part, they do have a grounding in the real estate business, right? So often they were the mortgage brokers that were peddling the bad loans in the beginning. They might be real estate brokers, so they have some connection to the real estate business where they can talk enough to convince, anybody that they've got a service.
And they set up an office, let's say, where they have a phone number.
Well, I think
guess
Christy
you
was
would know
right.
because you were trying to chase after them. We'll talk about the Attorney General in a moment.
Well, I think Christy's right. We saw all these bad predatory brokers out in Long Island in 2008 who suddenly they couldn't lend anymore. Right. So they had to find something new to do. And there was a heavy concentration out in Long Island of all these scammers or distressed property consultants or loan modification experts. I think they do play on their experience with real estate knowledge. But then, we've really seen it morph. There are people, now it's more common that people are dealing with a company that's not even in the state. They're dealing with outfits out of Florida and California, and it makes it much more challenging to try and go after them because, they're just a phone number, they're just a website.
Right, and more challenging, I'm sure, for our Attorney General, for example.
But one thing I want to say is there's a lot of different scams. We've so far just been talking about.
We're going to break some of those down before we.
Loan modification scam is one of them, where they are promising to help you. A lot of times, people find out when they call their bank that this company has not even sent their paperwork over, and people are revealing their most private kind of financial information, their taxes, their social security number, their paychecks, their all these
bank account
information.
You said that it started on Long Island, but then it morphed, as the word you used, and came to the Bronx. I wonder, and unfortunately we know what the economics are like. They look at a more vulnerable population, a population in greater need, and as when the recession hit and people were getting foreclosed, losing their jobs and getting foreclosed, then these unscrupulous people would say, well, you know what, hell with Long Island, let's go up to the Bronx. What I thought was interesting, and I know Jayla has the map that we're going to put up. This is a map that you folks provided. What was fascinating, folks, in the yellow on the right is the foreclosures, and on the left are the people who are subject to scams. It's like the same people. In other words, if you look where are the most scams, it's almost like you only need one of those maps because the foreclosures and scams are in the same place.
Well, it's, these are people that have been, as Justin said, really frustrated in trying to get a bank modification. They're trying to save their home. The way, the process works, it can take a very, very long time. Even when you've got legitimate, high-quality, free help, it can take a while. So if somebody comes to you and says, listen, pay me a couple $1,000s, I'll get you a modification, I guarantee it, you can see why somebody would go ahead and turn that money over. So that's, they're really preying on the folks that are in foreclosure. And there are also publicly available records for who's going through foreclosure. It's part of our legal process. So sometimes.
So you can find out.
Yeah, they
unfortunately,
lists,
so
actually.
Easily. Yeah.
But just another point about the map. The first part of the foreclosure crisis in New York City was all these communities that were redlined or reverse redlined. They were targeted for toxic loans, predatory loans that were never meant to last more than 6 months or a year. And they were targeted at communities of color. And if you look at those maps, it's very clear that these toxic loans blew up in those places. Then as we saw the whole nation kind of have a financial problems after the the mortgage market meltdown, then people started to lose their jobs, and their tenants were unable to pay, and the foreclosure crisis grew wider. But I think it's most concentrated in some of those communities of color, and they're also being targeted at times for these loan mod scams. For example, there's one that advertises on the radio. They use a Caribbean gospel channel program, and they have like this fake talk show where people call in and give testimonials. But we've encountered several homeowners here in the Bronx who got involved in this outfit, and they use a website called stopgreedybanks.com. And it has
it just goes on and on. I have to tell you, when it was presented to me that maybe we ought to do a show about this, I was like, well, we try to do the biggest issues. And as I read about it and learned about it, I said, this is just horrible. Ms. Peel, could you explain how does it work? So, and we're going to show some of the ads and things like that, but what is the conversation like that would force somebody to give up the deed to their home and lose a lot?
Well, so we'll move from the foreclosure rescue scams to some of the deed theft scams. And again, it's targeting the same communities. A lot of times, the conversation starts through somebody that might be from your community, might be from your church. It might be somebody who you've got, a friend of a friend. So they really.
And what do they say to you?
They use existing relationships, and so you might be saying to your brother-in-law, I'm having trouble with my mortgage, and he might say, oh, well, I met a guy who knows a guy who can help you out, right? So it's a lot of times people don't want to talk about foreclosure. It's an issue that may raise some issues of
and so then
discomfort.
When they call, what are they told?
So,
give me an example.
Well,
is that your area?
I'll tell you, these deed theft scams are having a reemergence. They were really popular before the foreclosure crisis, when someone might not have a mortgage on their property, they might be facing a tax lien, and or have a mortgage problem. And these distressed property consultants would come in and they would say, listen, why don't you give the deed to me? You're going to rent for a year, and then repair your credit, and then after a year, you can buy back your house from me. Now, what would happen is,
in other words, you're going to give, in essence, literally give the deed.
Right, under false pretenses, knowing full well that the person's not going to be able to ever repair the credit in a year enough to get a new mortgage.
With no intention to return the deed anyway.
With no intention, and they would go and take out a huge mortgage that would eat up all the equity in the house and walk away from this property.
It's like, we see these terrible stories of, let's say, a senior citizen is preyed upon by somebody in the street who says, go to your bank account, and it seems insane, but in that case, the desire to, I can make $20,000 right away. In this case, people are so desperate because they're about to lose their homes.
To answer your question, the way they get used to say, we'll help you save your home. Full stop, no holds barred. We will do whatever.
We understand what you're going
through. We will get you, where you want to be, and you're going to be able to keep your home. So a lot of times, a foreclosure rescue scam where you think that you're, paying for a modification, you might end up signing a paper that ends up being a deed theft scam. So you should never sign anything that a lawyer hasn't looked at, especially, one of the free...
A reputable lawyer, not a lawyer they suggest.
Exactly.
Right.
One of the free independent...
Or someone like
an independent lawyer.
So one of the new scams that we're seeing is around short sales, because New York
well,
has...
You'd have to give our viewers and the host a little more detail.
So a short sale is, if you can't get a loan modification, one of the ways to avoid foreclosure is to try and get a buyer out there who'll buy your house for fair market value, whatever that is now, but it's going to be less than what you owe the bank. And the bank will forgive the difference between what a person's willing to buy your house for and what you might owe the bank. And that's called a short sale, and it avoids, the end result of foreclosure could be that you could not only lose your house, but they could chase you down for the money that you owe above and beyond what they're able to get for it. So that's why a short sale is good, but you have to market your property out there. The problem is that the banks are, difficult to work with, and a lot of times they won't agree to lower the amount they'll take to what someone will actually pay for it. Plus, it's been really hard in the market to get someone who's qualified as a buyer who already is pre-approved for a mortgage, because mortgages are hard to get now. So people will be in foreclosure. I have a client like this, tried to get a modification, couldn't get it, has been in foreclosure since 2008. So what's that?
8 years.
8 years.
And, you know, extremely frustrated. So here comes somebody who says, I'm going to give you $15,000. Now, in a short sale, normally homeowners don't get anything back. They're just getting the benefit of getting out of the mess and getting that part forgiven.
Clean, yeah.
Exactly.
So here they're offering money on top of it, and they said they're going to solve the problem. So she thought she was going to a meeting with a bunch of paperwork in order to sign the contract for sale, not actually conducting the sale that day.
Right.
But along with all the paperwork, they had stuck the deed in there. And she was filling out paper after paper.
And just signed it.
And would
Signed
you
it
know,
over.
Wow.
these scammers provided her own lawyer, not of her own choosing, but she
Which
showed up
is
there.
what I said before. You got to
She
make
showed
sure.
up there, and this guy's, I'm your lawyer. And so you think that someone's there to protect your interest. And here, you know, they took her deed.
And what are the people who did that? Did they get in trouble? Did somebody catch them, or did they close the office and run away and nobody knows who?
We're
the heck
still
they
in
are?
the process that,
Wow.
you know, law enforcement officials are looking at them, and we're helping her get her house
I
back.
want to show these ads, which we have all seen, and many of us just look away, especially if you're not in a homeowner. So let's put up some of these ads. So these are ads that we see everywhere, right? Is it a safe blanket statement to say ignore them all?
I think that's absolutely a safe bet. Yeah.
So that if you see one of these ads, no matter what your situation is, ignore them all.
I mean, go to agscamhelp.com, and what you can do is you can look up and see if any of these guys are legitimate.
Now this one, glance real quickly. This one looks, right? Trust, right?
My Professionals.
866-99-TRUST at myprofessionals.com. I'm sorry, I
No, that's
interrupted
okay.
you.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and that's why we when we looked into this, we called our report "Who Can You Trust?" because they're really trying to really prey on a homeowner's desire to find someone who they can trust and who can help them.
You referred to it. I was going to
Yeah.
bring it up. The Center for New York City Neighborhoods came up with this really interesting study. That's how I did a lot of the background for the show, was to go through this, and it really lays it out pretty well. I want to get back to this idea that you raised early on about they hear it on the radio. Now, I'm in media, obviously. What radio station or TV station would accept an ad like that without having any idea? And I hear it on, it breaks my heart, on a Christian radio station. I saw some of the materials you provided. There was a woman who said, I heard it on a Christian radio station. I'm flabbergasted. Are we in the media completely irresponsible, or is the scam that good that they can present themselves? I mean, give me something on that.
Well, I think
You know
it's
something?
two pieces.
Yeah.
One is that I just think I continue to do outreach events in the North Bronx, and people don't realize that the government is providing free lawyers and free housing counselors who are HUD certified, who have the stamp of approval from either the Attorney General of New York State or HUD as a federal entity, and therefore that lack of knowledge that you could access a free lawyer, normally legal services usually helps low-income people, but in the foreclosure crisis, we help people who are very much middle-income people.
Yep.
And so most people, and sometimes people have an attitude like, oh, if it's free, it must not be good, or something like that. If I have to pay for something, it must be worth the money I'm paying. No, there are people out there who just want to separate your money from you and take
clearly.
advantage of you. So I think it's a lack of knowledge that you can access free services.
High quality,
legitimate.
very high quality services.
Sometimes we're more expert than if you paid an average attorney to go do it, only because that's all I do all day long for 8 years.
Also, because your intention is to support the people of the community.
Right.
You don't have any mixed goals here.
Independent, exactly,
Yeah.
right. Well, do you want to talk a little bit more about the advertising?
Yeah, sure.
Well, so obviously we want to do as much as we can to get to homeowners who are in need, and that's why we're so pleased that the Attorney General has invested so much in AG Scam Help, which is a mobile responsive web site
Yeah,
where
well,
folks
we have
can,
that website. We can
right,
put that on the screen. Go
where
ahead.
you can get tips, you can look up, dubious actors, and you can get connected to free, high-quality help, right? So we're thrilled that the Attorney General has really taken the lead.
He's taking it seriously.
Very seriously, and put resources out there. He's funded over 90 groups across the state, housing, counseling, and legal services to help homeowners. So that's huge. And that allows us to kind of start to advertise on Facebook, advertise on Google, and maybe be there when you do a Google search. Right, exactly. Get on Bronxtalk, which we're really grateful to be here.
Okay.
And in addition, though, we do want to educate the media. I think there's some of the trade rules around who can
FCC,
advertise,
yeah.
the FCC. It's a little complicated. It's not so black and white about how media channels can choose who advertises, but we can educate.
Well, I think certainly
and
if
we
they
can get the word out
suspect
about
it's
good
not
resources.
legitimate, they can. And I'm guessing that smaller radio stations, and having been in media a long time, if they see a willing advertiser, they're going to jump on it. I was thinking that, you try to get to the source and you try to go all the way back. Is there, or is the first step to preventing this all the way back when you buy a home in the first place and make sure it's a mortgage you can deal with? Are you finding that people who end up having problems with their homes was because, they weren't realistic about it to begin with?
Well, going back to the story that Justin was telling about the guy who said, here, come sign these papers, we've got a lawyer for you. If you're buying a home and the seller or anybody supplies you with a lawyer, you should really think twice. You should find your own independent lawyer, especially one who you can afford. There are lots of great lawyers, not only through Legal Services NYC, but through the City Bar that are affordable and great actors. So, on the purchase side, having somebody review the mortgage contract with you up front is incredibly important. Having housing counseling up front to make sure that you can afford and you understand the long-term maintenance.
Do you provide that, or you?
Our network of providers does, yeah. We have pre-purchase counseling for both.
That's
housing
very,
counseling
very
and services.
important, because a large part of it, and I said it at the top of the show, is where can legitimate people turn for legitimate information, and the Center for New York City Neighborhoods would be one of those places. You started out, as we sat down, Ms. Peel, talking about that the scams are evolving and the scammers are evolving. So I don't know if you want to run down. I've got a list of 3 or 4 of the.
Can I give one that
Yeah.
I just find absolutely
One of your
annoying and
favorites.
ridiculous?
Top
Well,
10.
in 2010, there was a big scandal about robo-signing. It was becoming clear that the banks couldn't really produce all the paperwork they needed to, the chain of title and the chain of the mortgages and things like that. And as a result, New York State courts put in some new rules to make them verify all the paperwork that they really own the mortgage and the note. But taking advantage of that press, there became this whole rash of what they call forensic auditors who said, for several $1,000s, we can review all your loan documents and find if there's a violation of federal law.
To see if you have a case.
And they would be saying, and with this you can get a free house. And so people...
I'm sorry for laughing, because I feel terrible for anybody.
And they
who
tell
gets
people
caught.
they won't be able to foreclose on you, this will get you a modification or a free house. And tons of people put money into this, spent $2,000, $3,000, and ultimately they're not telling you, yeah, there might be a violation of law, but you have to get a lawyer to assert that in court for you. And it's not like you just get a free house.
So now, yeah.
And I can't tell you how much misinformation I've come into where people think they're going to get a free house.
But I think the takeaway there is, if it sounds too good to be true, it is
It
too
is
good
definitely,
to be true.
certainly
right?
in this particular realm. The other thing which we didn't stop on when we looked at the map was the numbers. And, the darker areas, we don't have it up on the screen right now, but the darker areas, the number of scams was like up there in the north central Bronx,
Yeah.
there, the northeast Bronx. The numbers are really up to 36, which don't sound like a lot. But when you think about 36 families, 36 losing their homes, that's a horrible number.
And we're fairly certain that number is low. I mean, those are just scams that we heard about on our hotline, or that we at the Civil Rights Committee under law, the Lawyers Committee. So we're very confident that the numbers are underreported. That folks.
Listen, we run a clinic based in Bronx Supreme Courthouse. 851 Grand Concourse on the 6th floor. It's a walk-in clinic. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, people walk in to receive services and advice from us. And I'd say 2 years ago, it was not uncommon that every person that walked through that door seeking help had paid someone $1,500 to $3,000 before. We've had 3 examples where people paid over $15,000 to scammers and did not receive the help.
And again, I'm going to re-ask the question I asked before. Is somebody, do they go to jail? Do we catch them, or are they really difficult to catch?
They're really difficult to catch. In some cases, we've gotten people refunded their money back. But there's some groups that have, we look for a large outfit and a lot of victims from it because it makes a target that, it involves a lot of resources. And
so that makes it easier as opposed to one person who kind of gets
sometimes
scammed.
But that, goes back to the point that people who are using AG Scam Help can report scams, can report suspected scams, and that helps us give information to the law enforcement officials to try and prosecute these guys. So the more complaints we get, the better chance we have of catching them.
As we begin to conclude the show, you can see Jayla has already put up some of the information. This is really life-saving information for homeowners. So I'm not going to point to it, but make sure you take a look at it. How good is the enforcement? I mean, you seem pleased with Attorney General Schneiderman. Is there enough teeth behind the laws so that if somebody is caught, it's not a misdemeanor and they pay a fine and then it doesn't matter?
It's frustrating. I think in the last year with a lot of attention that's happening with the deed theft, there's a lot more coordination between DAs, the federal prosecutors, the Postal Service.
So it's better. What would you like? I'm going to ask you each one last question. What would you like to see right now in terms of enforcement or... I mean, certainly we'd like unscrupulous people to go away.
Yeah. I would like more, federal entities to get involved because the cross-state stuff is difficult when we find it someone in California or Florida who's done it.
And what about for you, Ms. Peel?
I think we would love it if we could find a way to get the attorney loophole removed, which allows folks to get fees up front and makes it really hard to get it back.
Right.
So,
because these things are regulated. There's both state and federal laws that prevent this very things that we've talked about from happening. Justin
Haynes from Bronx Legal Services, thank you so much. Yeah. And Christy Peel from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, thank you so much. This is vital information, and as it evolves, hopefully it will evolve for the better. You can come back and talk about it. We'd love to have you. Folks, we always promise to put our viewer mail on the screen. And so we got a very interesting email, rather lengthy email, which we've condensed about the show we did with developer Keith Rubenstein and Somerset Partners. This came in an email from Andre, and he wrote, so many people who work their way up in the Bronx will leave once they reach a certain income level. Where is it written that you have to move to the suburbs to get nice housing if you work your way up from a poor neighborhood in the Bronx? If someone moved into the soon-to-be-built developments in Mott Haven and Port Morris, would he be seen as an invader? Why is that person who became successful seen as evil? That's a very interesting perspective, and we do thank Andre for sending that email to us. If you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, send us an email at bronxtalk@bronxnet.org or put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like Bronx Talk on Facebook. You can check out our archives at bronxnet.org. We're on the lower right navigation bar. Next week, March 21st, it will be Councilman Andrew Cohen, who has participatory budgeting to talk about, among many other issues. Thanks to our producer, Jayla Juberis, and also to director Shirley Arietta, to Neilani and a cast of thousands, to our 2 wonderful guests. We'll see you next week. Good night.